So we're going to be talking about the War of 1812. As some of you who may have done the math have figured out, it is the 200th anniversary of that conflict this year. But a lot of people don't even know what it was about. So we're going to learn about that today and see all the great things that our country did. So we're going to ask you guys a few questions, and whoever answers gets prizes. So there is a ship called the Old Ironsides, which fought for the U.S. Navy during the war. Does anybody know what its actual name was?
Constitution.
Constitution. Oh, okay, you answered first. I know you already know. So you
You
get
had your hand up.
nice limited edition stamps of the U.S.'s Constitution. This picture is going to be in my slideshow. So,
Oh, wow.
does anybody know a very important song which was the result of this conflict? Yes? The Star Spangled Banner. So you get a very nice American flag, which does not have the correct 15 stars and 15 stripes of that flag, but it's close enough. And lastly, does anybody know the name of the captain who got so excited during the battle that all of his buttons popped off?
No.
Not Farragut. He was a midshipman at that point. Anybody know? Okay. Starts with an H.
Horatio.
No, it's British. They don't like those guys very much.
Starts with an H.
Yeah, starts with an H. It's a ship part. What's
Hornblower.
in the water?
Hornblower.
Hornblower is British too. We still don't like it. Oh, yes. So you get this nice sewing kit.
What was it? What was it?
It was Captain Isaac Hull. We'll talk about him more later.
Hull.
Like H-U-L-L. What a ship-like person. Like the hull of a ship. Okay, so. Alright, it'll come up in just a second. So, the War of 1812 is really interesting, but a lot of people still don't know about it. So, this is a Muskwa Amplified presentation. We are celebrating the 200th anniversary of the rise of the U.S. Navy, which is what the big deal with the War of 1812 was. So, why on earth is this important? The War of 1812 is commonly thought to be a second war of independence for the United States. The Revolutionary War made us independent. The War of 1812 kept us independent. And it made other nations respect our sovereignty a little bit more than they did before. It was also the beginning of our naval tradition. We now have a very strong navy, in fact the strongest in the world. But the naval tradition of the United States started with this war. And it gave us our national anthem, as Mrs. Bacon knew, and received a lovely green China flag. Okay. Okay, so we're going to overview the ship types rather briefly because you might want to know this later on during our presentation. So a ship of the line carries between 56 and 136 guns. They're basically battleships. But the British have a rating system, so first rate is 100 guns and above, second rate 90 to 100, I'm not sure why they even bothered. Third rate, about 64 to 80, anyway. Then frigates are used for scouting and commerce rating, so they're basically like cruisers. They have 28 to 56 guns, and that's what we'll be concentrating on during our presentation. Okay. Sloops of war were smaller than frigates, and they carried 16 to 22 guns. They were really easy to use because they had a very low draft. And what draft is that's the part of the ship underneath the water, so they don't go very deep into the water, meaning they can use small ports or shallow areas. They're also a lot cheaper because they're smaller. So, all right, weapons. We have long guns or cannons. These are cannons from the USS Constitution, the Old Ironsides. The Constitution and most of the other American ships had 24-pounder cannons, which means that they fired cannonballs that weighed 24 pounds. The British used 18-pound cannons, which means that they were a lot weaker than us. This is a carronade, which is another kind of cannon. It's shorter and fatter, meaning it fires a much larger shot but at a much shorter range. So their range is limited, but when you are close in, they're very devastating. And they use this thing called grape shot, which is basically a jar filled with bullets. And when you shoot it out of there, the bullets spray out and kill everybody. So people love those things back then. So ammunition, we've got chain shot and bar shot, which they sort of fly like a nunchuck and they rip up sails. We have grape shot, the canister full of bullets that sprays out. It's called anti-personnel, which is the nice way of putting it. This is round shot, which is your classic cannonball that everyone's seen and heard of, and jump into the pool like one. All right, background, causes of the war. There were a number of different causes for this war. The Napoleonic War was raging at this time between Great Britain and France and just about everybody else. It was essentially a world war, but it wasn't actually called that at the point. So Britain and France were at war, one of the most colossal conflicts ever seen. Great Britain won the Battle of Trafalgar in 1805, which meant that the French Navy was out for the count. The result of this was that Britain's naval power surged. They were now the finest navy on the seas. They had 400 ships. But, okay, Britain's a tiny island. You've got 400 ships. Where are you going to find people to sail them? Impressment. They would go around in the streets and kidnap people to serve on the ships. They would also go into the jails and drag out protesting criminals and say, okay, learn how to sail. That's what they do. Here's the problem, is that they wouldn't just do that to their own people. If there were American ships in the area, they'd board the American ship, say, hey, you look British, you're a deserter, we're taking you. Stuff them in a bag, put them back on board the British ship, you're done. This would reach a flashpoint in 1807. This is a picture of the press gangs in London. They would literally go around with baseball bats and whack people until they joined the Royal Navy. I'm not sure what this is about. I'm just not going to go there. So we're caught in a crossfire between Britain and France because we are a major trading power, right? So we want to trade with both Britain and France. Well, we trade with France, Britain yells at us. We trade with Britain, France yells at us. So pretty much we can't trade with anybody. So finally Congress says, enough of this. We're passing the Embargo Act. We're taking our ball and we're going home. It bans trade with all foreign countries. We're not trading with anybody. All right, well, what do you think that's going to do to the economy? We've got about thousands of ships sitting around doing nothing because we can't trade with anybody. So pretty soon we're thrown into a recession and everyone else starts laughing at us. So we said, okay, well, maybe that didn't work, so we're going to do the Non-Intercourse Act. All right, fine. We can trade with everybody except Britain and France. Well, who else is there to trade with besides Britain and France? So that doesn't work either. At that point, the other countries weren't really into trading yet. Basically, everything was done through Britain and France. So the impressment thing, the kidnapping guys, continues to be a problem. So there's an American frigate called the Chesapeake, which carries about 38 guns. She was sailing from the United States to the Mediterranean station to help blast away pirates. But the problem is that on the trip, she didn't have her guns ready to fire. They were all packed up, basically. So a big British ship of the line battleship called the Leopard, she carries 50 guns, not a very intimidating name, but still, shows up. They claim that the Chesapeake has 4 deserters from the Royal Navy, which of course it didn't, but they claim that it did. Captain Barron of the Chesapeake says, you can't come on board our ship. They basically demanded to board the Chesapeake. If you let someone board your ship, you're basically surrendering your ship. So Captain Barron says, absolutely not. I'm not surrendering my ship to you guys. What the heck? Well, so the Leopard attacks the Chesapeake and fires 3 broadsides. A broadside is when the entire side of the ship fires all the guns. So basically, the Leopard fires 75 cannonballs at the Chesapeake. About 21 of the Chesapeake's men were either killed or wounded. We're not at war with them. This is in peacetime. They attack our ship, then they come on board the Chesapeake, which finally surrenders and says, okay, okay, okay. Drag the guys off, and off they go. Well, that was kind of like 9/11. How would you feel if someone did that to us, right? It's basically an insult to our sovereignty. Before, they had been kidnapping guys off of merchant ships. They kidnapped sailors off of a U.S. Navy ship. This is the problem. So this is a battle. Here's the picture. This is the Leopard. This is the Chesapeake. Poor Chesapeake. Oh. Okay, so now there's a group of people called the War Hawks, which are a group of congressmen who are like, okay, we need to go kill all the British. Well, they do an investigation. They find that the British have kidnapped 6,000 American sailors. That's a lot. So that gives them a lot of kind of clout. A lot of these sailors, because they were deserters, the British wanted to make an example out of them, and a lot of them were whipped to death or hung as an example for deserters. And they weren't even British. So Henry Clay was the leader of the War Hawks, and he became Speaker of the House, which means that the War Hawks now have some clout in Congress. And on top of all this, we're having problems with the Indians. And the British think, okay, well, the Indians don't like the U.S., we don't like the U.S., so why don't we help the Indians? So now we find out that the British are giving the Indians guns, so that makes us even more mad. So, all right, we're kind of still mad about the Chesapeake and the Leopard. Well, the British said, okay, we'll give you back 2 of the guys from the Chesapeake after killing a couple of them. They said, sorry, we already hung a couple of them, but we'll give you back the ones that we have. So then a British frigate called the Guerriere in 1811 kidnaps another guy. At this point, we're like, that's it, we're done. So the USS President, which was the largest frigate in our fleet, was sent out by the US Navy to go find the Guerriere and make it pay, basically. Well, we found a British ship called the Little Belle. Again, the British were running out of names with 400 ships. We ran into the Little Belle. And it was, late at night, so we saw the little belt and we thought it was the Guerriere. We were like, oh no, we're gonna get it. So the president attacks the little belt, thrashes it, causes 31 casualties, so we have British have more casualties than we did. So here's a picture. Here's the president thrashing the heck out of the little belt. The little belt was small, so it was much smaller than the president. Then we realized, oh shoot, we're shooting at the wrong ship. Sorry, never mind, and then we left. That was it. Sorry. Yeah. So some people think, okay, well, if we have healthy relationships with England, it's going to help our economy. They're kind of like, okay, we need to stay friends with these guys because then our economy is going to do well. But the war hawks and everyone else thinks, if we're going to submit to them kidnapping guys off our ships, we might as well not even be independent. Because what's the point? So finally, the U.S. Congress declares war on Great Britain in 1812. So most of the War of 1812 was fought at sea. Our army was an epic fail, as you will see later on. But we're going to compare the armed forces of Britain and the United States. So the U.S. Navy was still a very new institution during the War of 1812. It was only formed in 1790, which is about 14 years after our independence, because these Mediterranean pirates were kidnapping our guys off of our merchant ships and putting them into slavery, and we literally had nothing to stop them. So we made our Navy, we went and showed them in spots. We also had the baptism of fire for this force during the Quasi-War, which wasn't even technically declared, but we did manage to completely whoop some French ships during that battle. And the Neapolitan War. And at the core of our U.S. Navy were 6 advanced frigates designed by the naval architects Joshua Humphreys and Josiah Fox. This is a chart from 1813. This is the U.S. Navy. This is the Royal Navy. There's a bit of a disparity, right? This includes rowboats. So after the Tripolitan War, Thomas Jefferson, who was the president, he did a lot of great things, but he was not good for the Navy. He said, okay, we're going to take all of our big ships that we built, put them into mothballs, and build 238 rowboats with a cannon in the front. Yay! All right. Well, all the big frigates were brought in a dry dock, and that was a big mistake. The result of this action is that the U.S. Navy, in 1812, has 17 ships. The Royal Navy has 400. Problem, right? So which would you rather have? If you had to be in a battle, which would you pick? I guess you picked that one, right? Which is on the stamps. I don't think Jefferson was. Anyway, this is the Constitution. The Constitution was cool because unlike Royal Navy ships, it was bigger than normal frigates, and we'll go into that in a minute. So the Constitution class frigates were designed to outrun anything they couldn't outfight. So they were big. They were bigger than most frigates. They carried 56 guns instead of the normal 38. So that's a big frigate for you. They were built from a very strong wood called live oak, which was very heavy and difficult to penetrate. There were 3 of them: the Constitution, the United States, and the President. The President was the one that thrashed up the little belt. They carried larger guns. They had 24-pounders instead of 18-pounders or 12-pounders. And they had diagonal cross bracing, which was this sort of thing like this, which would keep the ship from sagging in the middle. And then makes a stronger hull. They're also very fast. The result of this is that they're basically the most advanced ships in the world. We wish we had more than 3 of them, but they're still very advanced. So here's the Constitution, which is still around today. You can see it in Boston Harbor. This is the United States, and that is the President's. So we also had some smaller ships. Cities built us 7 frigates: the Philadelphia, Essex, General Greene, Boston, John Adams, Adams, and New York. Why they couldn't figure out to name 2 ships after the same person was a little confusing. I don't know, but that's what happened. Okay, so beginning of the war, this is our original flag. Originally, they would add another stripe and another star. So this actually has 15 stripes and 15 stars. But eventually they said, okay, if we're going to have like 9 new states, this is going to be a lot of stripes. So they ended up going back to the original 13 stripes. So this is basically all the stuff we've been over. So 2 important things. So the British Royal Navy, after they won the Battle of Trafalgar, nobody was fighting them. So they kind of let their training relax. They weren't as highly trained as they were before. And all of our sailors were volunteers. All of their sailors were kidnapped off the streets. So we had some higher morale. So the U.S. Army invades Canada. They didn't do very well. I guess they froze to death or something, I don't know. But anyway, the Northwest Territory was left wide open to a British attack since our army got wiped out. So the British attacked Mackinac, Dearborn, and Detroit. They wiped our army out. We tried to attack Montreal, but it didn't work. So pretty soon people were kind of demoralized. Suddenly, though, the Navy starts to do really well. The British, London Times or something like that, published this article that said, the U.S. Navy is nothing. It's a handful of fur-built frigates flying a little bit of striped bunting, but we showed them what was going on. We had a battle cry called Free Trade and Sailors' Rights, meaning don't kidnap our sailors. The U.S. ships did something different. The British, when a wave hits a ship, the ship goes up and then back down. The British ships would fire when they were up like this so that they would hit the other ship's sails. We fired on the down dip into the other ship's hull, which would then knock out their cannons, which was something important. So we had a better tactic. So, Constitution versus Guerriere. This is the first important battle. So the U.S.'s Constitution, which was a frigate, was forced to run away from 4 British ships, which tried to attack it. For 3 days, they chased each other. And the wind died, so they literally had, this is what they did. They did a really smart thing. They took a rowboat, they went out in front of the Constitution, they took an anchor, they dropped the anchor, then back and board the ship, they reeled the anchor in, which then pulled the ship over to the anchor. And they would do that repeatedly, and that's how you move around when there's no wind. Well, eventually we got away. Guerriere, which was the one that we wanted to find, but we found a little belt instead, was in the British squadron. Eventually the Guerriere ran into the Constitution another time, and the Constitution defeated the Guerriere in less than an hour. Well, this was the first time in 20 years that the Royal Navy had lost a sea battle. All right, well, that freaks out the British. The Constitution got the nickname Old Ironsides during that battle because the British cannonballs bounced off the sides. That's how small the British cannonballs were and how strong our oak sides were. In fact, one of the British guys said, "Oh God, she's made of iron," and someone heard her on board the Constitution, and that's how the name stuck. So here's a picture of the battle. Here's the Constitution fighting the Guerriere. By the end of the battle, every one of the Guerriere's masts had been knocked down, and the ship was in such bad shape that instead of capturing her, we had to blow her up on purpose because there was literally nothing left. Captain Dacres, who was the captain of the Guerriere, and Captain Isaac Hull of the Constitution were very good friends. When the Constitution and the Guerriere were attacking towards each other, Captain Hull said, wait. We want to wait until the ship is right next to us before we fire so we don't waste any ammunition. When the 2 ships came together, he got so excited that he said, "Fire!" and he did a jump, and he was kind of big, so all of his buttons popped off, and his britches fell down. He pulled them back up, and the battle continued. After the battle, the British captain tried to give him his sword as like an honorable surrender. He said, "Don't give me your sword. I don't want your sword, but I will trouble you for your hat." So he gave him his hat instead. So this is a picture taken a couple weeks ago. The U.S.'s Constitution on the 200th anniversary exactly of her battle with the Guerriere. Did a sail around Boston Harbor under her own power. She was not towed by anybody. They set her own sails sailing her around, and that was a big occasion. So that's kind of cool. So then the second big battle is the United States versus the Macedonian. The Macedonian, which was the British ship, saw the United States on the horizon and thought it was the Essex. Well, here's the problem. The United States carries 56 guns. The Essex carries 32 guns. That's a big miscalculation. Captain Carden of the Macedonian was a really mean guy. He somehow enjoyed whipping his crewmen, so he would do it every Friday. So they didn't like him. Captain Stephen Decatur, who was already a U.S. naval hero, actually captured the Macedonian, and instead of sinking the Macedonian, took it into the U.S. Navy. So look, we got another ship. Cool. So here's a picture. Here's the United States. Here's the Macedonian. The Macedonian is not doing very well, as you can see by the sorry condition of the sails. And the Macedonian actually continued into the U.S. Navy service well into the 1830s. War victories. There's a U.S. ship of war called the Wasp, which captures the British ship called the Frolic, again, running out of names. The U.S. frigate Essex pretended to be a merchant ship by painting over the gun ports. And so then they captured the British ship called the Alert. And then the Constitution runs into another enemy ship called the Java. I don't know why they named their ships after coffee, but anyway. The Constitution met another enemy ship called the Java. The Java was supposedly more of a match. They said, okay, this ship is bigger, better. It's going to beat the Constitution. Let's see what happened. I think we won. Yeah, okay. And bye-bye Java. And then we ran off and we were fine. So I guess the British had a pretty nasty surprise with that. So the war continued, then the U.S. Army continues to suffer defeats, and then finally, well, this isn't good, but anyway, our U.S. Navy suffers our first defeat in the War of 1812, which is really too bad. So, you guys remember the Chesapeake, the one that got thrashed by the British before the war even started? Yeah. Well, James Lawrence, who was an American captain, he won a battle in a smaller ship called the Hornet. He fought the Peacock. I guess the British like Palisades. And he accepted a challenge from this British captain called Captain Broke. This is what happened. The British captain sent him a very nicely written letter saying, will you please come out and fight me on, such and such day, at such and such time, and we'll see who does best, They were very civilized about it at the time. Here's the problem. James Lawrence has only had his crew for 2 weeks. The British ship has been together as a crew for 4 years. Of course, James Lawrence says, we're going to go out and do it. So he goes out with the Chesapeake. He has a chance early in the battle to rake the British ship, meaning he sails across the back of the British ship and fires all his guns in where the British can't shoot back. He could have done that, but he was too chivalrous. He said, that's not fair. I'm going to go side by side. Bad choice. The Chesapeake was captured in only 15 minutes. Lawrence's last words after getting shot in the gut were, don't give up the ship, but he did. This is the Chesapeake, that's the Shannon. The Chesapeake was taken into the Royal Navy, and the British crowed about it for months. So, if you guys remember, our army was not doing very well, and the Northwest was wide open. So, the key to controlling the Northwest was Lake Erie. Lake Erie was, you guys all know where Lake Erie is, right? It's up in New York. Well, the British, both sides think, okay, if we can control the lake, we can stop the other army, or we can invade. So, they both start building big fleets of ships on a lake. So our the two fleets attack each other, and Oliver Hazard Perry, who's the American captain, led our fleet to victory. We captured every single British ship. Yay! He actually flew a flag on the ship that had Lawrence's last words, don't give up the ship, and this time he actually didn't. His ship was called the Lawrence, which I believe may have been named after Captain Lawrence, who was killed in the battle. Well, the other big American ship was called the Niagara, and in the middle of the battle, the Lawrence was getting shot up really badly by the British, and he looks over, and the Niagara's not doing anything. She's sort of sitting out in the corner. So he starts signaling the Niagara, saying, hey, get over here, what are you doing? So finally, they don't respond, so he gets in a rowboat, rows over to the Niagara, through the middle of the battle, which is really dangerous, gets on the Niagara, it turns out they were too scared to fight. So anyway, he gets on board the Niagara, and they win the battle by breaking the British line. He writes a letter to Congress that says we have met the enemy and they are ours. So now the British start burning towns, right? The British also, since the Napoleonic Wars were winding down, their fleet was open to do whatever they wanted with it. So pretty soon they blockaded the entire American coast. So that means our ships can't get out of the harbor. That's not good. If all of our ships were in one fleet, we may have been able to do it, but every single port town demanded a ship to protect them, which means that our Navy was spread really, really thin. We did manage to score a few victories. The USS Enterprise, not the Starship, destroyed the British ship Boxer, but another one of our ships called the Argus captured a British ship that was full of alcohol. To celebrate, the crewmen went, yay! They drank all the alcohol. The next morning, the HMS Pelican shows up. Our crew was drunk senseless. When we fired our guns, they went like 20 degrees above the British ship because they couldn't see straight, and the British captured the American ship very easily because we were drunk senseless. The British troops sacked Buffalo, then the U.S. frigate Essex, which did manage to completely destroy the British Pacific whaling fleet, was captured in Chile. Then, suddenly, a good thing happens. There's a U.S. ship called the Wasp. It captures the Frolic. And then the Peacock, which is now an American ship since we captured the British one, that's like we own the name, captures another British ship called the Epervier. Then the same Wasp destroys the Avon, and then we capture the Reindeer. One ship captured 3 enemy ships, all within the space of a couple months. So we're really happy about that, but then the Wasp promptly goes into the middle of the Atlantic, sails out, disappears, never comes back. We still don't know what happened to it. So that's a little weird. This is a Wasp. Yay, Wasp. Okay. Hope that nothing too terrible happened out there. So the Army continued to be an epic fail. The British burned much of Maine. The American fleet tried to resist, but we literally sailed up a creek and went, ah! They were forced to burn every American ship to keep the British from capturing them. So there goes a big piece of our Navy. There's a tiny Connecticut town called Stonington, which managed to fight back. They had 2 cannons, and they managed to cause 100 British casualties and beat off a British battleship, which is pretty good for just 2 cannons. But the worst is yet to come. Does anyone know what's happening here? What's happening in this picture? That's the Capitol building.
Of Washington.
That's not good, right? All right. So here's what happened. The British troops scattered the American army during the Battle of Bladensburg, and they marched into Washington, gleefully burned everything, and the Americans were forced to burn 2 brand new ships, which we could have used, one of which was as big as the Constitution. It's called the Columbia. They were forced to burn them to keep the British from capturing them. So, okay, our capital's gone. The British have our capital, meaning our country, basically, if we lose the next battle, our country is over. You know, we're gone. The British are back in control. So our last stand is going to be at Baltimore. So the British are determined to attack Baltimore. There was one obstacle, which was Fort McHenry. Fort McHenry stood at the entrance to the harbor. It was sort of star-shaped. And the fort says, okay, we're not going to surrender. So the fort raised an American flag that was 32 feet by 42 feet. That is a really big flag. So we raised that flag so everyone can see it. And there was a big battle, and Francis Scott Key, who was a bystander, wrote a poem called The Star-Spangled Banner. We all know where that went. And we won, and the British were forced to run away from Baltimore, and our country was saved. So here's a picture of the battle, bombs bursting in air. This is what the flag looked like. Proper proportions, that's a really big flag. That's Fort McHenry today. And today, the original flag is on display in the Smithsonian Museum. The reason it's missing some pieces is because after the war, pieces were snipped off and sold as souvenirs, but most of the flag is still around. Actually, one of the stars was also cut out. So we're starting to end the war now. The British attacked at Lake Champlain, but we won the Battle of Plattsburgh, which is in Lake Champlain, by using the anchor to snap our ship around so it has like a fresh side. So that we won that battle and captured all the British ships. Here's a picture of the battle. Let's see. So then we have another thing called privateers. Does anybody know the difference between a pirate and a privateer? Yeah. A privateer is essentially hired or authorized by the government to go attack another country's merchant ships. A pirate just is a criminal. The privateers from America were very effective. They captured or destroyed thousands of British ships during the war. And this really wrecked the British economy. And we used a fast kind of ship called the Baltimore Clipper. This is a picture of the Baltimore Clipper that's called the Private Baltimore. So pretty soon we say, nobody's really winning. This is kind of a draw. The British aren't really doing anything. One time the British tried to attack Craney Island in Virginia, and they were so confident that they had a row barge and they put a little dog on the front to show how confident they were. We sank the row barge. The dog was okay, but the rest of the British were not. Anyway, they agreed to terms in a town called Ghent in Belgium. Why they went to Belgium, I don't know, but they did. And they agreed to leave everything as is from before the war, but they agreed not to do the impressment anymore. So the news took a long time to travel. It takes about 6 weeks for news to get across the Atlantic. So we kept fighting. General Andrew Jackson allied himself with Creoles and the pirate Jean Lafitte to defend New Orleans. They defended the city and defeated over 20,000 British troops. This was the biggest land battle of the war and the only American victory on land, or at least one of the few ones. We ended up sending the British general back to England in a pickle barrel because he was killed during the battle, so we bottled him up in formaldehyde and sent him as a birthday present or whatever for the British. This is a British poster. It says, Battle of New Orleans and Death of a Lion. That's what they called the general. I don't know. But that was a major victory for us. Here's the thing. Look at this. The British are charging us. We're hiding behind a wall. Who do you think is going to do better? We're behind the wall. They're like running at us. The British can be kind of thick sometimes. So the USS President was captured after a long chase by a large British squadron, which was really too bad because it was our best ship. And they almost got away. And we're like, yeah, we're getting away from the British. Oh no, we hit a sandbar. We're stuck. Great. So the British surrendered our ship when it got stuck and counted it into sedition. And we have one last naval battle. It's up to Old Ironsides to keep our Navy's pride going on. So the Constitution ended up fighting two ships at once, the Cyane and the Levant. The Constitution was commanded by Charles Stewart, who was famous for being a redhead. I guess that's important. He managed to back up. He went like back and forth like this. And so the Constitution was here, British ship here, British ship here. So he went like this to fight both of them at the same time, using some crazy trick with the sails. So both the Cyane and the Levant were captured during the same battle. Eventually the Levant was actually retaken by the British, but we kept the Cyane. This technically happened after the war was over. So this happened at night. Here's the Constitution fighting the Cyane and the Levant, and we did very well. So that was sort of our last hurrah. The Constitution never lost a battle. She's on display in Boston. It's the oldest commissioned floating warship in the world. The Victory in England is older, but she's in a dry dock. And she still sails once a year around Boston Harbor under her own power, and every day she fires her guns. She's used as a sail training ship by the U.S. Navy, so she's still a commissioned warship. And a lot of the U.S. Navy cadets go for about a year on the Constitution to learn about our naval history and how to use a sailing ship. see, aftermath of the war boosted American manufacturing because we had to make everything for ourselves. The British never messed with us again. Impressment was stopped, national pride increased, the Indian strength was reduced, and we got our national anthem. And because our Navy did so well, they said, well, we need a better Navy. So we built 9 battleships and 12 frigates, which were kind of handed up. So this is the battleship Ohio with 104 guns, one of the fastest ships of the line ever built. She hit 12 knots one time, which is pretty good for a sailing ship. Considered the finest ship of the line in the world. And the Pennsylvania, that is really big, 140 guns, look at that, huge. So that's it. But anyway, it really boosted our morale. That's why the War of 1812 is important. It was the second War of Independence, and it's really good. So does anybody have any questions? No? Okay.
I just have a comment. What goes around comes around. I read in the paper today that the new shipbuilding, they're going to go back to wind power.
Yes, I read that article too. Yeah. Wind power has a lot of advantages over steam power, but it goes both ways. There's a lot of argument about that. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed our lecture series. We have a couple flyers about the Vaquita on that table back there. We also have a sample of our newsletter. If you want to sign up to subscribe to our newsletter, there's a sign-in sheet there. Most of you, I think, already get it. But if you're interested, you can sign in there, and you can also sign up to hear about future Muskwa Amplified events. We're planning on maybe having another event in December. We have some more lecturers that are interested in giving topics. We're not sure when exactly it's going to happen yet, but we will let everybody know as soon as we do. So our organization, like I said, is for middle school and high school age boys. We do value-added activities and community service. More information about what we do can be found on our website, which is sites.google.com/site/Muskwa Club, but it's easier just to go into Google, and type in Muskwa Club, and we're the second search results. Or take a business card, which we have in the back. So hope you all enjoyed it, and have a very nice Labor Day weekend.